seems like live-action adaptations of beloved anime have been coming more and more frequently over the past few years, specifically ones aimed at Western audiences, and starting roughly with the Death Note movie and slowly being disseminated with drops like the Cowboy Bebop live-action and One Piece, we finally arrived at an attempt on none other than Yu Yu Hakusho. Now, longtime fans of the channel know that Yu Yu Hakusho is a little bit of a speciality of mine. It's probably my favorite shonen anime of all time, and it sits on top of that list for a bunch of reasons that I'm going to get into later. But when I saw it was getting a live-action adaptation, I was, of course, skeptical to say the least. But when the trailers were released, I was a little bit more willing to give it a shot. There seemed to be a serious budget given to the series, and the production value looked high, especially for a Japanese live-action series. But as we all know, money isn't everything, right? And it seems like we're in a bit of a classic shonen renaissance right now, with Rurouni Kenshin receiving an anime reboot, and One Piece getting one too, and yes, that's actually happening, don't ask me why, and rumors of more remakes coming down the pipeline, including possibly Yu Yu Hakusho and Naruto. And while the Yu Yu anime remake is speculation, we've received the promised live-action adaptation on December 14th, 2023, so by now you've either seen it or you don't want to. But what I will say is that if you haven't read the manga or watched the original anime, stay away from this adaptation. Seriously, it will ruin the entire series for you. In fact, don't even watch this video. Go away, watch Yu Yu Hakusho, read Yu Yu Hakusho, and then come back to get the dirty from me. Now, we've been garnering a bit of a reputation on this channel for being the ones that review these attempts at transitioning from animation to live adaptation when it comes to anime, and I'm gonna continue to give my honest reviews of this content because I think it's important to know specifically what your friends may be getting into if they've not necessarily dipped their toe into the anime river. General Western audiences are still more likely to watch live action than animation. So if you've been annoying your coworkers about anime on the daily, they're more likely to watch the live action adaptation to shut you up, which in many cases may ruin your attempts to convert somebody into the degenerate weeb lifestyle we all enjoy. So the question still remains, is the Yu Yu Hakusho live adaptation still Yu Yu Hakusho? Well, let's get into it. Hey, what's up guys? It's me, Mike, using the camera I probably should have used for this entire video. It's been a minute, but we're back, and I just wanted to let you guys know a little bit about what's going on with the channel this year. Oh, come on. You wanted attention. We got 21 videos planned for this year. They're all gonna be big old bangers. Getting down? That means we're going to be finishing our Yu Yu Hakusho series. That means we're going to be doing videos on Saint Seiya, Sailor Moon, Inuyasha videos, Gundam videos. It's going to be a big year. We're considering it a return to form, and in that spirit, we have updated our Patreon. Now, longtime fans of the channel know that the Patreon is the bread and butter of our business. It's where we do the majority of our content. We're talking streams, we're talking music streams, we're talking watching 90s, 80s OVAs that you've never heard of.
What did you say, wise guy?
I'm not trying to be arrogant. It's just that I haven't slept in a couple of nights. And I'm really not interested in jumping through your hoops.
Oh, really?
Hey, man. I'm not some trick pony that you see at the sideshow at the seashore. Cut me some slack pops and let me go home.
See me after class.
The Patreon gives you access to the exclusive Discord server. It gives you access to the exclusive community. You can get an additional podcast per week. That's right, we have a podcast that we put out every week called the Bonsai Popcast. Bonsai Popcast Premium is only through the Patreon. You can also catch me on Twitch, where I mostly stream fighting games. We're talking Street Fighter 6, Tekken 8, King of Fighters, Guilty Gear Strive. We're going to be coming out with a lot of new merch this year. We're going to be doing lots of long-form content videos. But we can't do that alone, which means that we're going to need editors to help us while we're writing and researching these topics, which means that any support on Patreon is a huge help, allowing us to be able to pay editors a fair wage that they can live on. And every year around November, December, obviously people drop out of the Patreon because it's the holidays and they need to save money. So we are looking to make up some of the money that we lost last year. And we did have that extended break, but that extended break is officially over. You're getting this video this week, you're getting another video next week, and then we are on the roll with the big productions. So don't just watch the videos, come be a part of everything, be a part of the Patreon, be a part of the community, come to our watch parties, watch crazy old OVAs with us. Check out our podcast, Bonsai Popcast. It's on all podcast platforms. And come hang out with me while I work my way up through the competitive ranks on fighting games over at twitch.tv/bonsai_pop. Of course, watching the videos is more than enough, but we'd love to meet you guys and have you guys meet our excellent community that have been there for us through everything. Until then, on with the show. In the year of our Lord 2024, I think the community is unilaterally aware that the Death Note movie is, if nothing else, a meme. It is objectively terrible. However, we actually might be biased on that end. Now, to explain what I'm talking about, my fiance's dad watched the Death Note live action movie when it came out, and he absolutely loved it. And of course, after hearing that and bleeding from our eyes, my fiance and I convinced him to watch the show, and when he eventually did, he came back like a dog that got whacked on the nose, profusely apologizing. And honestly, he's not even that much of a normie, so suffice to say these attempts to cash grab a general audience with insincere production absolutely can work. And let's not bring up Disney's constant fecal explosions and how much money those make. So here we are with Yu Yu Hakusho. I had some mixed feelings, like I said, pre-release. I knew that it was going to be a Japanese production, which comes with its own positive and negatives. Their animated live action content is so hit or miss for me. Obviously, we're talking cross-cultural experiences here, but I often find these to be both under and overacted. This isn't an issue I have with other Japanese films. For instance, I'm a big fan of their horror movies, and the acting is always appropriate and generally very good. But with anime adaptations, they almost go too hard. I can't really put my finger on it, but part of something being turned into live action necessitates it being believable in a specific way. It's difficult to bring these crazy characters to life without making them look silly. Maybe the overacting is for kids and I'm just dealing with arrested development, I don't know. Wigs are also always a big issue with me though. With such advanced wig technology out there these days, I have no idea how they managed to make them so terrible. You also need to go all in with making actors either into cartoon characters or into believable human beings. For example, I think One Piece does the former well, and the Kenshin films succeed decently with the latter. And this necessity to commitment was already going to make it difficult for Yu Yu Hakusho, which is both a fantasy and still somehow grounded in the real world. Finding a way to make that feel genuine through the characters would be a challenge, and you'd need some good actors in order to do it. And on that note, as far as I'm concerned, the cast was pretty hit or miss. I really liked Shuhei Uesugi as Kuwabara, and Go Yano was great as Toguro. He was really a perfect fit. I didn't even recognize him from his previous role in which he played Kenshin. Hiei was portrayed pretty alright by Kanata Hongo. His wig even looked pretty good, but they made other decisions with his costume that confused me. Botan was portrayed well by Kotone Furukawa, and that was a character I was worried about, but I thought she did about as good as possible given the role and the writing that she had to deal with. She was basically written in as a side character. And just about every single performer in this show has worked in other anime adaptations, but I have not seen them. And as far as anybody I didn't mention here, I wasn't particularly enthused with their performances. But before we dive any deeper, I do want to go into the things that I actually really liked. And for the record, the live action Yu Yu Hakusho is sitting at a 7.3 on IMDb, a 78 on Rotten Tomatoes, and its audience score is an 83. So obviously it must be good, right? Now, I'm not on the site formerly known as Twitter anymore, and I haven't read any reviews, so I'm totally clean here opinion-wise, but those scores are obviously average to high, especially for a live adaptation of an anime. So for me, I think the best thing about the series was the action itself. Too often these days, directors and film crews get lazy with shooting action scenes. They phone it in by taking a ton of close-up shots of fists hitting things, and you generally can't tell what's going on. If you watched our episode on the One Piece live action show, I had a lot of gripes about the cinematography, but it was obvious that director Sho Tsukikawa wanted Yu Yu Hakusho's action to be the primary focus, and as far as that goes, he did a great job. The angles are great, and it all just felt really high quality. There were moves in there that literally make Marvel movies look like a joke. It's what I want to see from action. And in this case, it was sincere and very well done. And I pretty much have to give it to the film and direction all around. This did not feel like a low-budget cash grab at any point visually. The colors weren't great. There was a pseudo Zack Snyder blue-green film on it, you know, filters to make it look like, I don't know, a little bit grimier than whatever, like, you know, like serious and stuff. But that's only a minor issue some of us would care about or pick up on, and it bothers me specifically because I think Zack Snyder is trash. The special effects were generally really good. I think that's what had everybody excited for this series' potential in the first place. I mean, the trailers made an obvious effort to show people how much effort went into making Yu Yu Hakusho look good, and in that regard, I wasn't disappointed except for the weird demon dogs at the end that just didn't look like they existed in reality. But for all intents and purposes, the show was a seriously good action series, visually all around. The fights look the way they should, the visual effects added to them rather than pulling you out, again except the weird demon dogs, and the roundworms look kinda bad, but whatever, it's still an A effort given what it is. And that's it. I mean, everything else was horrible, and the rest of the video is going to be me explaining that in detailed specifics. So if you were hoping this video was going to reaffirm your opinions about how this is the greatest show of all time, I'm sorry to disappoint. And on that note, it's legitimately hard for me to point out this show's biggest flaw because there were just so many, but damn, I guess we'll start with the most obvious one. They had 5 one-hour-long episodes to work with. That's not much time. So given that knowledge, you have to seriously consider what to cover. And the beginning of Yu Yu Hakusho isn't the most action-packed couple of episodes, but it is fundamentally important to the rest of the series in that it establishes relationships and character. These are complex characters with complex relationships to one another, and those elements are what drive the story, not the fights, not the tournaments. It's the characters, who they are, how they relate to another, how their relationships and personalities foster bonds that create need and urgency and drama, both with the audience and with the story. Without that, you're left with a super low tier shonen. But again, you only have 5 episodes, so what do? You have to get something exciting in there and keep the interpersonal drama between Yusuke, his teachers, his peers, his mother, Keiko, Kuwabara. You gotta keep that to a minimum in order to maintain viewer retention, right? This is an action series. So maybe make the 3 cursed objects and the demon thieves the main bad guys. That would be something that you could easily do, especially with only 5 episodes. You give Yusuke and Botan and Keiko and Kuwabara 2 episodes at the very least to get established and work up Hiei and Kurama and Goki as the main villains. And the Hiei fight, which didn't happen in this series, could be a really solid ending with a teaser for Genkai's, tournament introduction as the next season. But of course, maybe the production staff were told that this was all they had, maybe it was predetermined that this series was not going to get a second season, so they had to make do. But I mean, you still have things to work with. 5 episodes feels like an audience test to me, not a this is all you got, good luck type of thing. But I feel like even if it was the latter, the audience reception could get a second season that wasn't expected greenlit. It's better to do it right and hope for more than create an abomination you really can't follow up. So given all that information, they decided to compress 66 episodes of anime into 5 hours. That is absolutely insane. That is minimum 23 hours and 10 minutes squashed into a little over 1/5 of itself. When I told Tyler that's what they did, he was absolutely dumbfounded. They went from introduction to the end of the Dark Tournament in 5 episodes. It almost seems redundant to go into any specifics after saying that because it's obviously the most idiotic thing you could do. But if you haven't watched the show yet, just think of the implications of that. Obviously, there had to be an astronomical amount of content cutting, which included Kuwabara's sister, Genkai's initiation contest, the big fight with Hiei, the Saint Beast arc, the introduction of the Black Club with the gauntlet run up to save Yukina, and the first Togoro fight, the second Togoro fight before the Dark Tournament, Pooh, and all of the Dark Tournament itself because they just kind of skipped and mashed things together. And this destroys all of the character development, growth, and bonding between Yusuke, his family, and his friends, which again is the most important part of the show. It wrecks the important subtleties of Yusuke's bond to Genkai, which is the most important relationship in the show. And it destroys what makes Yu Yu Hakusho and not Shonen A, or at least that's the best way to explain it. Basically, they cut all of what I mentioned and smooshed Team Togoro versus Team Yusuke into the rescue of Yukina. It was like a combination of the Dark Tournament finals and the introduction to the Black Club, so instead of the assassins, Team Yusuke fights Team Togoro to save Yukina and Keiko, cause why not? It's such a mess, it's honestly hard to explain.
by all accounts, it doesn't make sense.
But this also means that all of the major plot of the Dark Tournament is dumped on you in 5 hours, ruining what made the Dark Tournament so great to begin with. That arc is not about the tournament, it's about Yusuke, Genkai, and Toguro. It is a crossroads of Yusuke's future. Will he become like Toguro, or will the teachings of Genkai save his soul? Pooh is a physical manifestation of Yusuke's subconscious. The entirety of the series revolves around who Yusuke truly is. Is he who he projects on the outside, or is there a genuine good person under all of his anger and aggression? Will he give in to his cynicism and give up on the world, or will he rise above it and seek a better path? And on this journey, he finally finds an adult he can look up to and respect, only to tragically lose her to an impossibly powerful enemy after going through the torturous process of internalizing her will. This creates a drama that cannot be matched by a simple tournament arc. It's something that sticks with you. It's what makes this series as great as it is, and specifically that arc. To take that away is to take away the soul and the center of Yu Yu Hakusho, and that's exactly what this adaptation did. You get maybe a total of a half hour with Genkai before she just nonchalantly gives Yusuke the spirit wave. Literally, she's just like, here you go. And he's like, thank you. And then she gets killed by Toguro, and you're like supposed to care. In fact, if I'm remembering correctly, I think she gets killed off screen. And then when Yusuke finds out about this, he's supposed to be really upset, but he barely knew her. All she did was teach him how to stand on one finger, and then she like yeets him a glowing ball. It just destroys everything. It takes away character motivation, feeling, emphasis, gravity, everything that made these specific moments special and impactful. And the whole show can kind of be summed up like that. The writing was terrible. Even before the shark got jumped, they got Yusuke wrong right off the bat. Almost immediately, he's portrayed as a really good guy who hates bullies and stands up for the little dude. It makes no sense why people are scared of him. He's just a quiet guy who keeps to himself and is kind of rude here or there when people are shitty to him. There's really no explanation within the dialogue or visually that tells why Yusuke is treated like crap, which, like, how do you f that up? Yusuke is loud, he's a complainer, he actively works to not be the good guy but cannot help begrudgingly doing the right thing when it matters. He acts like a jerk, a pervert, a menace, he drinks, he smokes, but when he needs to make a snap decision, he will sacrifice himself for the sake of others. He's expressive, he's funny, he's mean. This Yusuke is quiet and sulky and basically makes no sense. For some reason, in live action adaptations like this, they have to make like the cool character way too cool. They did it with Zoro too. Zoro was awful in One Piece. This Yusuke is not funny, he's not likable, he's not Yusuke. He's some other guy who sucks, which is accidentally confirmed during the scene depicting his wake. So instead of the subtle emotional blips you see through his principal and others in the anime, it was basically just Keiko and Yusuke's mom alone with his body. They tried to do Kuwabara's big outburst, which, you know, is meant to show that Kuwabara needs Yusuke as you know, a goal, but it was ruined by the kid Yusuke rescued from the bullies, which shouldn't even have happened in the first place. Yusuke saves the kid in episode 1 by extorting the people who were bullying him. Again, doing the right thing while not doing the right thing. This was a mess, and Yusuke's mom isn't even worth mentioning. She's a nothing character. And having never watched the Tokyo Revengers or the I Want to Eat Your Pancreas live action adaptations, I can't say whether this is bad writing or Takumi Kitamura being a shit actor, but one way or another, they just got this horribly wrong. Keiko is also pretty weak. Her and Yusuke's relationship is poorly portrayed other than her just being his childhood friend. And Keiko's role is to be the one person who truly sees Yusuke for who he is and love him unconditionally. She is also a tough girl who gets put in danger because of her ties to Yusuke, but she is never a damsel in distress. She will throw down when she has to. And she is played by Sei Shiraishi, who between 2018 and now has had about 3 pounds of lip filler put in, which makes her very uncomfortable to watch for me. But that aside, she just wasn't the feisty girl she's supposed to be. They tried a little bit in the latter episodes, but in the end, she just sat and cowered in a corner with Yukina for like 45 minutes, so what was even the point? Kuwabara, on the other hand, was pretty good. He wasn't given the screen time he needed or the characterization that he needed, but again, Suhei Uesugi did everything he could to play him right. For instance, it wasn't really explained that Kuwabara is hyper spiritually aware, and his relationship to Yusuke wasn't shown to be as antagonistic realistic and important as it really is, but he was somehow able to present his character as faithfully as possible given what he had to work with, which wasn't much. And he was very much a shonen protagonist without overacting, at least not for the character that he was playing. I even liked the way he looked, and getting his hair right was always going to be a challenge. I don't know why they went with blonde instead of carrot top, but it wasn't too offensive. At least it wasn't a wig. And his crew was also pretty funny. It was basically the only levity in a show that should have been funny, so I appreciated it. Kurama was a wet blanket. Honestly, out of every character in the show, I expected Kurama to have the most work put into him. He's a fan favorite and beloved by horny weebs across every spectrum, but honestly, he might as well have not been there. His little story arc about his mom was wicked boring. He was boring, and Yusuke's whole intervention with him in the mirror was totally brutalized by the writing. Now, what makes that scenario compelling in the anime is that Yusuke jumping in to save Kurama is a spur of the moment decision. It's one of those situations where Yusuke's inner altruism just falls out and he impulsively does something heroic. In the live action, he premeditated giving up half his life for Kurama, who he doesn't know at all and has no reason to give a shit about. It's really bad. And Kurama's big fight with Karasu is pretty cool, but I literally laughed out loud when he showed up as Yoko Kurama. Like, I was excited for that. I thought it was gonna be like this big cool thing, and he just looked like a fucking NPC at a furry convention. Honestly, it was goofy and anticlimactic, and it looked terrible. And again, Hiei was alright. His fights were cool. The actor fit the part. But I thought it was kind of dumb that he used the knife to cut his forehead and then that became the Jagan eye. Then the eye wasn't even really mentioned or explained. I actually don't even remember what happened to the knife. They may have just totally forgot about it. And for the record, I wrote this like right after I watched the show. That's how like unimportant this stuff was. What got me was that they decided to give Kanata Hongo ice blue colored contacts. I don't know why. Hiei's eyes are not blue, and these didn't look cool. He looked dumb. I don't understand the move unless they were trying to hint that like he and Yukino were related, but it's not like that was a secret in this show. It was openly talked about consistently, so there was no reason to give Hiei these goofy contacts. He didn't talk much, he wasn't funny, but he showed up and did the Hiei being cool thing, but it wasn't like overly cool like Yusuke or Zoro from One Piece. Like it was alright. He was more than we could have asked for in this adaptation given the writing. That's not to say he got a lot of personalization, because he didn't. Now, always adult Koenma kind of annoyed me, and it wasn't so bad until the older Toguro brothers showed up, right? I don't feel like getting into him too much. There were things I liked and things I didn't, but he showed the lengths that the team were willing to go to visually portray these characters the right way, sometimes. But Koenma is funny in the source material because he is a little kid with a pacifier running the underworld like an overworked salaryman. I'm not saying to get a child actor, nobody wants that. But obviously the special effects budget was there if they were going to shrink the guy who played older Toguro into this monstrosity that he was. And if you're going to do that, like at least try to make Koenma. If you want him to be an adult, make him active in the final fight or something. It just didn't seem like they cared when it came to him. It's another character that brought levity turned into an over-serious wet blanket with a pacifier. Again, why give him a pacifier and make the newcomers who've never seen Yu Yu Hakusho spew question marks out of their heads if you're just gonna have him be an adult the entire time? It makes no sense. Speaking of not caring, let's talk about Genkai. First of all, Meiko Kaji didn't have a chance. She is almost 80 years old, but she looks like she's 50. Genkai is a shriveled, grouchy old lady who smokes butts and drinks. I'm sure they could have pulled any tiny old Japanese woman off the street and she would have done a fine job. But instead they went with Kaji, who is a classically trained Japanese actress, who is not only beautiful, but way too elegant to be Genkai and way overqualified for this series and this role. Maybe if Genkai was more relevant in this show, you'd want somebody with the kind of chops that Kaji has, but for this purpose, again, you could have grabbed anyone off the street. And the funniest part about Genkai's entire existence in the adaptation was that she was just used to show Yusuke and Kuwabara training, which is especially insane when you realize that Yu Yu Hakusho is one of the only shonen anime with basically no training arc. Yusuke's work with Genkai is talked about for like 30 seconds because it wasn't important. His relationship with Genkai was what was important. Here, they spend half an episode with Yusuke Yusuke half-assing his training and then being able to stand on his finger, and he's given the spirit wave. It's legitimately mind-boggling considering the source material. Also, Kuwabara's there too. I don't know, to have a rivalry thing, or to maybe explain the spirit sword because there was no Genkai like initiation arc, whatever. So before we get into the big villain, I wanted to mention the music. This may have gone over some people's heads, but I cannot believe how bad the music was. Part of what was so appealing about the original anime was its pop art aesthetic. It was colorful, exaggerated, the characters, they dress like real people. It has this special feeling to it, right? Something that makes it stand out as a moment in time without screaming, "This is the 90s." The theme song, Smile Bomb, is about as Japanese city pop as it gets, and it all worked together to create this complete feel for Yu Yu Hakusho's place in time. And here we get rap metal. Regardless of my personal feelings for this genre, it's just not something that should be anywhere near Yu Yu Hakusho of all things. And otherwise, the sound was pretty good, you know, sound effects and everything, assuming you weren't watching it with the English dub. For some reason, the dub messes with all of the other sound in the show and just turns it into a muddy mess. Also, there wasn't a lot of production done with the dub. Everybody's voice was always the same volume. It's pretty bad. Okay, so the main villain, let's talk about him. And weirdly enough, the big bad isn't really Toguro. Instead, it's Sakyo, who's played really well by Goro Inugaki. Honestly, as far as Sakyo goes, in the way they showed some more of like the Black Club, which I don't believe they ever specifically named in the show, it was at least kind of interesting. The problem is the way it was all set up to reach the climax. So right up front, we're shown this like giant, like impossibly large hole in the middle of the city, which isn't Tokyo, even though I'm pretty sure the original series took place in Tokyo. I don't know why they had to name it a different thing. Maybe it's like Shinjuku, even though Shinjuku's I don't fucking know, whatever. And again, this giant hole, not something that existed in the source material. So in the first episode, we see the demon roundworms that appear in the Saint Beast arc coming out of the hole. In fact, it's one of these demon roundworms that like crawls into this guy's nose or something and possesses him when he's driving a truck, and that's what ends up hitting Yusuke and killing him. Which, like, I don't know why you need to do that. It was fine when it was just like some dude not paying attention and like macking on his girlfriend. And then you get a fight with the bullied kid Yusuke rescued, who has also been infected by the roundworm in this like pseudo zombie conflict after Yusuke just yeets back to life and everybody's totally cool with it. But before all that, we get this exposition about how the demon world and human world used to be connected, and that obviously made me facepalm. Nothing like a bunch of exposition to let you know you're really in for a good show, or at the very least that the plot doesn't make any fucking sense. So Yusuke uses his spirit energy to beat out and then kill the roundworm from this kid, and like the kid's been totally like disfigured, and then he just goes back to normal like nothing happened. I don't know, magic I suppose. And this is all the first episode. So in another episode you find out that Sakyo traded Yukina for the property rights of the sinkhole, which who cares? This is like the Star Wars prequels talking about the Senate. But anyway, this sinkhole apparently goes all the way down to the demon realm, even though it doesn't actually go down to the demon realm, because Sakyo needs a giant evil science lab to try and open a portal to the demon realm at the bottom of the hole, which is his end goal because he's a gambler who may or may not have a superpower that lets him win all the time, and he's bored and wants to make the world more interesting by reopening the portal between realms and like letting demons and people fight or something. So the whole climax is him gambling his life on Toguro in a Toguro versus Yusuke fight. You see, he had finally opened the portal enough to let a ton of roundworms out, whatever, but Koenma steps in and puts up a temporary barrier to hold them back, and if Toguro wins, then Koenma like has to let all the roundworms out or something, and if he loses, then Sakyo has to blow his brains out. So despite all the changes to the story, Toguro is ironically almost exactly the same Toguro we know from the source material. That means he's like out of this world, insanely powerful. He's the most dangerous enemy that Yusuke faces throughout the series for the most part. And in the anime, Yusuke's victory is hard fought and he barely scrapes by, but he earns it through trial and tribulation. It shows that he's truly internalized the teachings, will, and power of Genkai and can now fight for the side of good and to protect the human realm as the spirit detective. That's part of what makes the Dark Tournament one of, if not the best tournament arcs ever created. It's the feeling of a truly earned victory through real character development. Character development which is well thought out and dispensed appropriately. But here, Yusuke hasn't done anything. He fought a demon-possessed kid, he fought Goki, he gave up half his life to save Kurama for reasons. He fought and lost to Hiei, he trained a bit, and then was given the Spirit Wave YOLO style. But that's it. The Spirit Wave isn't even explained, but obviously he beats Toguro, because of course, you know, he's the hero with a big spirit gun, and you kind of get the same end to the fight you get in the Dark Tournament, except it wasn't earned and feels superficial and hollow, and it didn't even look cool, and it sucks. And did I mention that this whole, like, end of the show basically happens in a warehouse? It's the place where Toguro takes a fall, etc., etc. There's no crowd, there's no hype, it's all just really flat and disappointing. So here's the hardest part, right? Which I have to be fair to the show, right? I have to try and take myself away from the source material and look at this as a work of art by itself, a story by itself, a production by itself. And if I do that, would I think it's a good show, right? Am I being fair to it? And to the best of my ability, I would say yes, I'm being fair, and this show sucked. Yusuke, the main character, is not particularly likable, and that's a big problem seeing as the series revolves around him. His ties to the other characters are extremely loose, which makes a lot of his motivation either confusing, weak, or non-existent. For example, the section about Kurama and the mirror. The way people treat Yusuke doesn't make any sense given the fact that he's like actually a good guy. I mean, he literally helps kids who are being bullied. And in that scene, it just seems like the teacher's being a prick, rather than him actually not knowing that Yusuke wasn't the bully in the situation. And while Kuwabara is likable, he's not relevant enough in the minute-to-minute experience of the show to carry it. I know I didn't talk about Botan much, other than to say that she wasn't offensive, but that's because she was mainly a background character. She didn't have the emphasis or screen time to carry Yusuke through the series. Koenma and Kurama were wet blankets. You basically didn't need Kurama in the show at all, and Koenma just wasn't any fun or really even that interesting. He was an exposition dumper. You're not made to care about Genkai at all, and she isn't likable anyway, so her dying shouldn't matter to a new viewer, and it shouldn't matter too much to Yusuke either, because he barely knew her. Toguro was cool, but he was just an obstacle, and because Yusuke didn't do anything to earn his victory over him, it made him seem far less of a threat than he should have been. Nothing really tied together that well, and none of the characters were written well enough to create emotional attachments to the audience. Even with Keiko being captured, supposedly giving Yusuke motivation to fight Toguro to save her, Keiko isn't given enough character or emphasis for you to really care about her too much either. She basically never did anything, so there's very little stakes emotionally for the viewer to make the show dramatic. And yes, Yu Yu Hakusho is a power fantasy, yes, Yu Yu Hakusho is a shonen, but above all of that, Yu Yu Hakusho is a drama. It is a character drama. This was not, but the action is really good though. That's the thing. I think out of every anime to live action adaptation I've ever seen, Yu Yu Hakusho has the best cinematography and choreography when it comes to the action itself, which is something that often lacks in other shows like this. These scenes were legitimately enjoyable, and for a small amount of time, I was able to lose myself in it and just have fun watching some cool fights. But you can do that without trying to adapt something as good as Yu Yu Hakusho into 5 hours, let alone at all. You can make an original show with much better characterization and writing with this level of action and that time restraint. In fact, I think because this is Yu Yu Hakusho, that's its ultimate downfall. If the writers didn't feel like they had to condense 66 episodes of an anime into something that made even a semblance of sense in 5 hours, this could have been much better. But instead, we got an absolute mess of a story full of characters you don't really have time to care about and some really sick action scenes. But you cannot rely on excellent action to carry a 5-hour show. And I think that's what they tried to do. Someone at some point must have said, okay, we're totally fucked here. Maybe if we go ham on the fights, people won't notice how bad this is. And so they did that. And apparently it worked. It's a shame that kind of talent was wasted on a show this flimsy. And it's a shame people mistake that for quality. Shows and movies are not generally made to make you go, ooh, cool. While they can have that effect, the purpose of visual entertainment is to tell a story, to make a statement and deliver on that. They generally have a point, and how that point is delivered to the audience and how well it's delivered, whether it's visually or auditorially or through dialogue or a combination of all of those, determines the quality of the art, of the production. This version of Yu Yu Hakusho failed to do that on every level. However, the worst part of this debacle that I mentioned way in the beginning is that if you're somebody who hasn't seen or read the actual source material of Yu Yu Hakusho, this show has ruined that for you. All the fun little details, the story arcs and plot points, and especially the death of Genkai and the final fight with Toguro are smashed. Part of what makes the anime so good is not knowing or expecting what's going to happen. There are legitimate surprises and dramatic moments within this show. Yu Yu Hakusho is not a super straightforward, shonen anime for kids, and the twists and turns, especially of the Dark Tournament, are what make it so good. It's surprises that you didn't see coming and how the characters deal with them are very engrossing. And yes, you can assume with 99% certainty that Team Yusuke will win the tournament, but that goes for all main characters in all series. They have plot armor. But how the victory is achieved and what they had to do to earn it is what defines the show, and all of that gets spoiled here. Yu Yu Hakusho live action is the definition of spoiler. And you can have the outcome of a show ruined for you, but how that outcome comes to pass can still surprise you. But this adaptation basically gives you the cliff notes with just zero substance. Its existence is a major threat to anyone who might eventually be interested in Yu Yu Hakusho. It's on Netflix, so it's super accessible. It's live action, which makes it even more appealing to a general audience. Granted, it is in Japanese, so there's a barrier to entry, but still, and it is absolutely ruining the source material. The surprise death of Genkai is one of shonen anime's greatest moments. How she dies, why she dies, what happens before she dies, and what that death means for everyone, but mostly Yusuke and Toguro. That's absolutely top tier content. It is timeless, perfect, and it was desecrated. This is a bad show, and the good parts, the action, the choreography, the effort put into them, are unfortunately superficial band-aids made to cover the fact that this show sucks. It's not hard to make people go ooh cool, but it is hard to write good characters and create a good plot. And what's so insulting about this is that this team already had that. It was already cooked for them. They just had to serve it. But instead they chose to, drop it on the floor. There's plenty of good action movies, good kung fu movies out there you could watch instead, but if you were to choose this on a whim, it will ruin one of the best anime out there for you. So to answer the question, is this still Yu Yu Hakusho? I would say a definitive no. It's the bones, you get some plot points, but there's no meat, there's no soul. It's like the TV show version of a mannequin. To me, it is a worst case scenario, and I truly hope it fades into obscurity like most of these adaptations do. But what did you think? I mean, there are plenty of people out there that loved this. I mean, people that I respect who love this. I'm not an authority, this is just my opinion. And despite my feelings, like I said, the show has seen a lot of praise on the internet. It's got good reviews. People have gone out of their way to rate it highly on plenty of review sites. It broke Netflix records. So give me your thoughts, and I'll catch you next time with an in-depth video on an old anime, because that's what we do. And I'll see you then.